Hey guys, welcome back to yet another episode of Pre-Production. Thank you so much for listening once again. I have a guest with me this week that I am genuinely so excited to talk about, having seen his film. His name is Pascal Plante. He's the filmmaker behind Fake Tattoos, Nadia Butterfly, and the upcoming Red Rooms, which has had a wonderful festival circuit and will be premiering on VOD October 4th. This is, I think, one of the best films of the year. I think it's masterful. It's an exercise in extreme restraint, which is even more impressive considering the extreme subject matter of the film. And as I mentioned to you off recording, I just want to say I'm really excited to just learn from you, man, because I really do think you've made a film that people can study and learn from, but is simultaneously thrilling in the genre space. It's suspenseful. It's very, very scary, and you pull off a miracle in this movie that I'll talk to you about later with your main character, and I just want to give you some praise, man. It's a great movie. Congratulations.
No, thank you. Thank you very much. It's kind of the film's life is kind of never ending. We premiered in July of last year at Karlovy Film Festival. Then we did Fantasia, but so like more than a year ago. And now my brain is completely, I try at least to have my brain on other projects that I'm writing, but I keep talking about this one. So I guess it's special for a few people. And thanks for having me. It's a pleasure. Thanks for the kind words.
You know, I've talked to a lot of folks who saw the movie, and everyone was impressed, and everyone had a different takeaway of the protagonist. Everyone felt, well, she's doing this, she's doing that. I'm gonna take the pressure off you and let you know I'm not gonna pick your brain about that, because I know you don't want to give answers. I know you don't want to give answers. You made too good of a movie to be like, well, this is what she's really doing. I know that you want to leave it ambiguous, but and I think that's actually fun. The idea of the mystery of wondering why this woman has come to this court case. And I guess we should set up the movie for people. Essentially, what Red Rooms is about is a man who has been accused of making snuff films, and he's on trial. And you are following a woman who has come to these court hearings, and she's just sitting in the audience listening. And we don't really know why she's there. We have a potential inkling of an idea of why she might be there. And through these court hearings and through her life outside of the court, we're learning about this horrible case, these terrible crimes, but we're also wondering why she's there. And what I first want to ask you, before we get into your life as a filmmaker, because we'll get there, what I first want to ask you is what I was so fascinated by as a writer is how you were able to convince people that you could make a movie where the protagonist's motivations are so ambiguous, and that the audience would not be detached from her as a result, because we're not. It's fascinating, but you have found that perfect through line to present a protagonist that you don't really know exactly what she wants, but we are so invested anyway, and that's so difficult. How did you do it, man?
No, well, I guess generally speaking, I think being identifying with the character is sometimes it's a bit overrated as a concept in cinema. But if you don't identify, what is your parasocial link with the character? And if you are doing kind of the more anti-hero type character, well, at the very least, you have to make that character extremely fascinating. That's key to me. For instance, like, why would I follow the guy in There Will Be Blood? Well, there's this whole intro scene where he crawls out of a hole. And then you're like, okay, this guy like is super driven, like obsessively driven, and will stop at nothing to do what he does. And that's it. You're fascinated. And then you can despise him. You can be intrigued by him. You can be ambiguous towards him. But at least I think having protagonists that are banal is actually... it's very hard to pull it. This is a sin in a way in most films. So anything that could enhance that sense of mystery, the red flags or just and I needed also. I worked with Juliette Gariepi. It's her first lead role in a film. We found her through casting process. But there's something you can't look away. There's this magnetic charisma it's a one in a million type thing, and we needed that because we knew otherwise the film would crumble even before it can lift off the ground. Because the motivations are extremely blurred out, and in the second half it kind of gets into focus a bit more. But even then, the film plays with the very contrasting ideas. Like, is she there to do good? But then she also there. She does some super selfish things. She indulges in her dark fantasies, So all of this is at play. But to me, what keeps the film going is my job for this film is to make her as captivating, as enigmatic, as fascinating as possible. And I think also in a meta way, the film only will work if you look at her the way she looks at him being the killer. So, you don't quite, you're not quite sure what's lurking in the dark, but you actually, the more you obsessively focus on this character, maybe you'll find it. And so I try to get the viewer into that trance-like state where you can't look away. So everything, like the cinema language, is at play to help that. The sound design, the camera movement, like all the tools in the toolbox are there to enhance that the key factor that it makes or breaks the film, I think.
You succeeded without a doubt, because oftentimes being detached from a protagonist, as you said, is a sin. It's a film killer when you're watching a movie and you're just not relating to the lead, or you're not understanding why they're there or what they're doing, or you don't buy their motivation. You have found such a wonderful way around all of those traps, because all of the things you said are true, but I think it's also the intensity of the story, of the crimes that she's hearing, that also creates sort of a chain reaction in the fact that she is reacting without reacting. And when she's hearing these things, but her face is kind of blank, that also, for me, generated this intense need to want to learn about her, because how are you not feeling this? This is so horrible, these things you're hearing. And so it's this perfect, I think, combination of plot and character that creates exactly what you wanted.
Yeah, she's fascinating because she doesn't think like 99+% of the people. So you want to know what's her deal. And so, I mean, if we are too Stikelian in reality, we can have many, like, maybe she's neurodivergent, maybe she's this, maybe she has that label. I didn't want to be overly explicit about a label, because I think sometimes in life, labeling stuff makes them less complicated. And I think I find value in complex stuff. Like, I think if somebody did a horrible thing, it's not just the product of a single chain reaction that stems from, like, I don't know, like playing violent video games or having a trauma in the childhood. It's way more complex. If you see society as this incubator that can create these kinds of behavior in life, and then we have to figure out, like, why is it? Like, what's the root of evil? Why did that happen? And maybe I'm rambling a bit, but I think this is what's interesting. But also, I think dissonance within the character is it's a very good way to achieve that. Like, for instance, she doesn't look like someone, just the contrast. Like, she doesn't look like someone who would do that. Oh, that's interesting. That's dissonant. Let's say she does like a video workout and there's like this pop song playing. That's dissonant because she's just done a scene where she's basically like hacking the mother and being very, like, extremely tech savvy, proficient. Just anything that can be dissonant in a weird way, but also, and on top of that, we even filmed her like this ghost-like presence. This is also kind of key in the DNA and in the aura of the film, that she's also, I think, potentially interesting in the fact that she's filmed like this 1,000-year-old vampire or this ghost or this entity or this, and so that in itself creates this this other layer of enigma on top of it, which is fun to play with, because it's a genre film at the end of the day. Like, why not being expressionistic and colorful and expressive, and why not have fun with the language and the codes? And
yeah, I was fascinated by clearly the amount of research that you did with the film as well, because not just the hacking world, but the dialogue in the courtroom, everything that's said by the news reporters as well feels very authentic. Nothing feels sensationalized, which would have been very easy to do with this subject matter.
Yeah, the talk show is on the line, maybe. I don't think we went into satire, into like grotesque, but we were. This was the scene that terrified me the most. So actually, the fake talk show scene.
Right, where she calls in.
Because I don't really watch that kind of TV, and I didn't want it to show. And yet, I mean, I'm obviously there's a critique there, but I didn't want it to feel like parody. So maybe this scene was very scary for me to do, and I had lots of talk and lots of doubt. But apart from that, I think because I think the films, it starts at least like if this were to happen in reality, this is roughly how it would unfold. Now, there are differences between, let's say, the Quebec Canadian court system and, let's say, in the US, or but these are details. Like this is pretty much how it would unfold. How the media apparatus would take that story and mythify it to the point where is this what creates the fans in a way, like all the noise around the case. And obviously, if I am to make a reflexive film about true crime obsession, I have to think about the media, of course. So yeah, thank you for pointing out the research, because obviously there's a lot of research. I had consultants, I had people smarter than me or like more knowledgeable than me on many subtopics. Let's say like the courtroom scenes. Obviously, I had lawyers and legal consultants there. The technological consultants, and even him, I was like, yeah, but why do you even use a Tor network? Like, I would just go on Discord and have people there and just do my snuff film, on the surface web through an app like Discord. That bummed me out a bit. But then the film is also it plays with the folklore. The folklore is the film, like the killer in the film, the fictional, dare I say, because it's really not based on nobody that lived. Because I didn't want to give any publicity to a real killer. I think they have way enough. They all have their Netflix shows anyways, so I didn't want to, to add to that.
Yeah.
But the fictional killer, I thought a lot about the new technology and like just internet culture. And internet culture, they obsess about the myth, what has been mythified. And so, of course, like maybe even doing the snuff films on the dark web, on the Tor network, it would be counterintuitive for many levels. And yet, like, it actually makes sense if we think of it in a meta way, in a postmodern, like, self-reflexive way. It made sense for the character to do that.
Did you discover movies at a young age? Did you see films and immediately know, oh, maybe that's something I could do? Or was it just something... Like, it fascinates me, this part in someone's life, because when I look back on my youth and my discovery of film and running out of a movie theater and thinking, I'm going to make movies one day, I look back on that kid and I think, he lost his fucking mind. What possessed him to think that could be something that could be done? So I'd love to know what that spark was for you.
Yeah. Well, I loved films, but in a very casual way. I think it unlocked in my teenage years, to be honest, but it made sense. Like I had this almost epiphany-like moment where, because I used to draw a lot. I was at 2-year-old even, like I grabbed a pencil and I started it. And then my whole imaginary world was based on that logic. Like I made some comic strips, obviously like deep fantasy stuff, like medieval dragons. Like I was into D&D as well. So, all that. It clicked that it wasn't the act of drawing that I was enjoying the most. It was almost like having the finished product and having something linear that tells a story visually. And comic books and movies are so similar in many ways. So that's why I'm saying that I had this kind of epiphany-like moment where I'm like, well, wait, but like a film is basically everything I love without necessarily like the painstaking. And I was good. Like I was good at drawing, but it was almost because I had to if I wanted to convey something. But then through cinema, photography, and I also love the human component of films. This is what's very different from comic books, is that you also have so many other people to pick their brains. For me, a filmmaker is somebody who is kind of knowledgeable about a lot of things, but then like have somebody better than himself or herself in every other department. Like I shouldn't be a better photographer than my DOP. I shouldn't be a better costume designer than my costume designer. And yet I need to have strong opinions about what I want and a clear vision and be able to express it well. But also working with the actors, I love that. I've loved that since the first time that I tried it. But that would be a bit later in life. That would be at 17, 18 that I was doing maybe my first shorts, which I would be super embarrassed to show because they weren't good. But that's not the point. I don't think we need to be good right away. Like I just think we need to love doing what we do. And if we love it, we'll keep at it. And if we keep at it, we'll get better at it. But I did film school after. So when I was a teenager, I discovered it's like entry-level filmmakers, like auteur filmmakers, like everyone else. Of course, when you see a Tarantino film the first time, you're like, oh, cinema can be that as well. It's not just like, because sometimes you get the feeling watching just mainstream films that there's no real people putting the strings. It's almost like the images, they are created in front of your eyes and they don't attract too much attention to themselves. They just convey a story. And it can be like that for a while, but then you see a few auteur films, and these are the same for like my generation. Then that would be like the Tarantinos, the Wes Andersons, the Burtons. Those wouldn't be necessarily my favorite filmmakers, but they're so important, these filmmakers that make generous, auteur-driven, singular films. They are key, I think. When you discover cinema, you're like, oh, it can be very unique. It can be an artistic expression as well as entertainment. And so, yeah, I mean, seeing Kill Bill when I was, 15 in theater, just randomly, and not knowing what to make of Kill Bill because it's kind of weird still, it's mainstream, it's appealing to a teenager, but it's not the same movie, the kinds of films you're used to seeing. And so that led me to the rabbit hole of like video store. I made buddies with the video store clerks. I ended up being a video store clerk myself. So long story to say that I come from the film lover side of the spectrum more than the side where I wasn't filming my family gatherings. I wasn't the one with always a camera in hands. This really came later. But my love of films, like love of drawing and telling stories came first. Then understanding that film can be an artistic expression, putting one and the other together, and then just discovering, from Tarantino, you discover Scorsese, from Scorsese, De Palma, from De Palma, whatever the regular rabbit hole is, and eventually you're like down to Bergman, Bellatar, and Kurosawa, and all that. And even now, I keep discovering stuff even more obscure. If you follow me on Letterboxd, like I still am a very avid, obsessive film watcher. Like I try and watch a film a day, and I've been doing that for 15 years more now, for more than 15 years now. So a lot of movies in my brain now. But
I think you and I should follow each other on Letterboxd. Because I do the same thing. I watch at least a movie a day, and I always log it too. I'm careful now though. I don't rate them anymore. I don't rate them. No,
I don't rate them. Because I value lasting impact more than ever, more than initial reaction. And I think whenever you watch and you rate, like you have the urge to just share to the world your initial reaction. Whereas, yeah, because I know, like, for instance, there are so many films that I didn't like, or I thought I didn't like when I came out of the theater. And like years later, these are super important films for me. Like, I don't even think you would be pretentious to say like you liked 2001 the first time you see it. Like, I think people find it boring, but like we remember it. It lasts. It has an impact. Now I rewatch it. I'm in awe of this film, but like at 16, it's a boring.
No, I think we're I think we're about the same age. I'm 36. And the first time I saw 2001, I rented it from Blockbuster, and I remember being surprised that it was rated G. I thought that was very interesting that it had like such a child's rating for a movie. And I too was incredibly bored by it. but I was also 13 years old and very much
Yeah.
so not ready for it. I had the same experience with Blade Runner. I saw Blade Runner way too young, didn't get it, thought it was going to be like Star Wars, and it wasn't. And but now I love both those movies. And so, listen, I'm really fascinated by the idea of getting into drawing first because, like you said, a comic book panel. I mean, it's like storyboarding a film. You're
Yeah, of
storyboarding
course.
your shots. You've got your concept art right there. So, do you also storyboard your films yourself, or do you work with a storyboard artist, or is that something you're not really into?
I have never worked with to this day. Well, now I don't storyboard my old films. And not that I'm against it. It's just very time consuming, and whatever is the quickest, most efficient way to express. For instance, in Red Rose, there are the long takes in the courtroom, and the courtroom is actually a set. So there would be like a 3D because it was done on SketchUp, like in the architect software. But the SketchUp thing can be put very efficiently in any 3D software. So we literally did like the live 3D storyboard on scale in the environment. So this is way better than like a regular storyboard. So for these scenes, we had like 3D long takes, and I asked the actors to do a take of their dialogue, and so and I could play in 3D on scale, and that's obviously way better. I would storyboard scenes that need to be communicated visually. So, and I don't even care about doing nice. I do them very quickly. Like I just try to be efficient in anything I do, to be honest. But in my previous feature, there were lots of underwater shots. So those, for instance, I would storyboard because the communications is kind of hard. You're working with a team underwater with CB, and so if I could show anything visually, like it would be just way easier than explaining or even doing a kind of a regular shot list for them. So if I do storyboard, I do it for a very particular reason. It's because it needs to be clear and visually extremely clear to everyone. Otherwise, I just say it out loud when I do the blocking, and I have a shot list that is kind of detailed. But what I like more than storyboards now, which is maybe funny, but I think it shows where my heart is in watching Red Rooms, but I love overhead. I just love, okay, the character is going to move here. The camera is going to move like there. You have a bird eye view of the scene, and here's my staging in that bird eye view format. And I come to love this even more than storyboards now in a weird way, because this is very efficient. This is like, that's how people move. That's how camera moves around them. That's the choreography. I love choreographies. I love musicals. I love Hitchcock films. Whenever I'm bored with contemporary films that I think have no mise-en-scène and it's just two people face to face and shot counter shot, when I OD on these, like you rewatch Rope or you rewatch, just like older films that had this very keen sense of choreography into their movements, and I love those.
I learned a lot about the top-down sort of like diagram of scenes on making my movie, because I had never done that before, and I gratefully had extensive time with my cinematographer before we shot the movie. I had like a year, honestly, where I was able to just talk back and forth with him, and we created sort of a God's eye view, top-down view of like every single scene in the movie, and it taught me. It kind of it forced me to rewire my brain about how that imaginary part of my brain viewed camera movement. Because when I'm writing, I tend to imagine camera movement even in the script stage. And I'm thinking about like where things might be, and I start to get that picture of the scene. But looking at a diagram like that, it kind of made it practical. Like I was able to think like, well, I'm not going to be able to move the camera there because there's a person standing there, or because there's a wall there, so we're going to have to remove that wall. Things like that, the practical sort of construction, technical side of the camera movement itself I never really looked at it like that. So yeah, the top-down view is super, super helpful.
super helpful, but also it's completely okay to not think about your camera movement in a technical way first. This wouldn't make sense. Like you don't move the camera because you know how to move you know what I mean? It's like
Yeah.
you have to move the camera because it makes narrative sense, because see, there's Laszlo Nemes worked with Bellator, and Bellator in his very like dark, brooding Hungarian way of thinking and seeing the world is like there's only one good place for the camera to be. That's a bit extreme, but thinking with that kind of rigorous, just having a rigorous way of feeling like, okay, no, yeah, what lens is this, the right lens? What angle are we? Eye level? Are we high angle, low angle? Are we moving? Are we zooming? Are we? It's a never-ending what if. But then it's very good to ask yourself these questions. But it has to come from the narrative intent first, and eventually, yeah, doing those diagrams, this become extremely practical. Like this informed which walls could be, which walls we could move. Literally, like quite literally, the way we would build the set was based on these diagrams. So it's extraordinarily practical. But the idea, for instance, in a courtroom to move in this fashion, it's the feeling I wanted two things. I wanted to feel like you were a ghost floating, because that's literally like what Killian looks like in the first part of the movie when she just roamed the earth. But also akin to VR. So I wanted the camera to be kind of floaty, a bit video gamey, like it's not down to earth. It's like, it's just floating, but also it's almost like you were having a VR, like an Oculus or something like that. And you could be the one kind of having an out-of-body experience and just looking at the lawyers and maybe drifting towards the killer and maybe going back to the lawyer, and just, it has that logic to it. And that informed everything else. That informed the fact that we would use a techno crane. Me wanting to use a techno crane didn't come first, But I'm saying this and it makes sense saying it out loud. But so many times it's not like that. There's so much ego in the act of filmmaking that sometimes, like, oh, I want a 10-minute long take. Yeah, but I mean, why? Like maybe it's the best way to tell that story. Maybe, but maybe not. And it should be the logical conclusion, not the start of something. Of course, sometimes a filmmaker would have me like once, like, oh, I would love to potentially do this and would love to potentially do that. But you have to be humble about these things, and it needs to be in the service of something, of your story, or something that is coherent with your artistic endeavor. And yeah, anyway, I ended up with like an 11-minute long take on the techno crane, but believe me, like it didn't start like that. I didn't start with like, no, it would be very immature.
I can imagine walking into the production meeting and saying, all right, so we're going to have an 11-minute techno crane shot drifting around multiple actors. We're going to be zooming around this courtroom. We're going to tilt up to the TV screen, which is showing evidence of the case. Then we're going to zoom into our protagonist. And first, AC, make sure you keep all of that in focus. Like, I imagine that would be a very difficult first meeting to have. But that courtroom scene early on in the movie, I'll tell you, I was watching the movie with a friend of mine, and he leaned over to me about 5 minutes in and he went, "Have they cut yet?" And I said, "No, man, this has been one." It's very impressive.
I like the hypnosis that it can induce, because if you reduce the amount of stimuli your film gives the audience, the audience's brain picks up and the imagination is stirred up, and then you fill in these blanks, and maybe your eyes will, your eyes will wander. And I love that in a film. I love when I can, maybe if I want to look at this character, I can, because I have time, or if I want to look in the background, if I want to drift into my head, I'm allowed. And that's also because I think so many filmmakers, they are scared to just leave the audience alone with their thoughts for even 1 second. Like, it's a sin. I don't think it's a sin. Like, even filmmakers are way more radical than me. Like Theo Angelopoulos said in an interview, "I don't care if people fall asleep in my film. That means they're in safe hands." Like I wouldn't go as far as to say it like this, but I love when there are just these little, a bit of time, that the film, that I can dialogue internally with what I'm being presented, instead of just being offered like stimuli upon stimuli. And well, thank you. But then the aim was also to kind of drift and get lost and be kind of hypnosed by it, if it makes sense.
Yeah, it's very rare for me to really, truly get lost in a movie, you know, because once you've made films your whole life and you've seen thousands of them, you kind of you know how the goose is cooked, so to speak. Like you kind of you're seeing the wheels turn. But in a film like this, I really was just truly lost in it with no spoilers, but there is a very intense hacking scene, or hacking scene, probably not the right word, but a very intense scene involving money being, you know, shifted around. I was just lost in that. It's one of the best examples that I will use in the future, by the way, as a comparison. If anyone ever challenges me with like a spec script I've written and says like, you can't have an action scene where someone's sitting in a chair, I'm going to say, watch this scene in Red Rooms, because this is literally one of the most riveting thriller scenes of the year. And this person doesn't leave her computer chair. It's very difficult to tell that side of the internet world now, of how sometimes just staring at a screen can have like this sort of life and death implication of this level of intensity, because it's there and she's not leaving her room. It's brilliant.
Well, it all amounts to what's at stake. Like, do you as an audience understand what's at stake? In this scene, we have a character that has been anesthetized for like an hour and a half, and now she's experiencing it in such a viscerally intense fashion. And also, I mean, I wanted this scene to work with people who don't know like poker, like don't understand. So it's intelligible, I think, because we understand what's at stake. You know, Shane Carruth is a prime example. Like in Primer, you have no clue what they talk about.
Yeah.
But you somehow understand, like you understand that they understand each other, and you understand enough that you know what's at stake at all time. And so, of course, like it might be overindulgence at times, but it just confirms to me that you don't need to actively understand everything that's going on. But what is key to understand is what's at stake. And to me, like the climax scene of Uncut Gems is actually a good. Yeah, I haven't talked a lot about Uncut Gems actually, but this is the one scene that came to mind. You know, the end with the basketballs going on at once with so many other things. Very frantic. It's more editing based, which my brain is a bit less equipped to understand. So it was very hard to shoot because I kept wondering, like, do I have everything? Like, will people understand? I have no clue if it's gonna work in edit. Like, I'm just gonna stick, because filming screens is so painstaking. Like, it's very hard. It's a 2D plane. If you make your design, if the design of what's within the stream is well made, it's not going to be super underlined, like the key info you need to watch, right? Like it's very chaotic. A computer screen is very chaotic. You can watch anywhere. So my work is to actually orient to the eye of the audience. It's the opposite of what I was saying earlier. Like I sometimes like when the audience is free to roam the world, but this is one scene where I'm going to grab you by the throat. I'm going to tell you, like, you have to look here. Please understand that. And I just think it's an acting. It's the acting that sells it. To be honest, it's just Juliette experiences whatever she's experiencing in this scene very viscerally, very intensely. And I think after such a cult film, it makes the blood boil. I feel, but that's just a testimony to how good I think Juliette is in this scene.
She's terrific, an incredible actress, genuinely an amazing find. Something else about that scene, and really the whole movie's use of technology that really works for me, is I'm going to kind of go out on a limb, and I don't think you did too much screen replacement. A lot of that looked like real images that were on the screens. Those lights that the screens are creating are hitting your actor's face. All of it matches. And I say this because my movie has a lot of screens. And it was very important to me that the TV screens, the phone screens, computer screen, that all of it was, that there was reference for the actor on set to be able to see a lot of these things and act with them, but also that the light that was hitting our actress was matching the things that you know, and it felt very authentic.
Even the reflection in the eye, like, you know, if you have a close-up of the actress, like you might not actively, but well, there is one shot where it literally is like the reflection of the eye of the screen in an eyeball. But apart from maybe this very obvious shot, even at other times you wouldn't really notice it, and yet we are so used to screens in our lives. Like there's screens everywhere that if it were not there, I think we would notice. I don't think we notice when they're there all that much. You do because you're a filmmaker and you're dealing with the exact same questions that I was dealing with. But I don't think the regular movie goer would care. But if it's done wrong, I think they would see that something's up.
Absolutely. And I think that is a theory that can be applied to just about anything in film, period. If something is good, the audience doesn't necessarily notice. That all came together really nice, I guess. The light came through the window perfectly that day. They're not thinking about the fact that, 5 people are out there with C-stands pushing that light up through that window. But if, like you said, if something is wrong, they start to notice. But I notice bad screen replacement now a lot because of having to do it on my film and knowing like what not to do. And so I was just very impressed with how authentic everything looked and felt in this movie, period, because it just made it scarier. There's a lot of dialogue where news anchors are saying things like, today's the dreaded day, we're going to hear and see this and that. And I'm just sitting there thinking like, oh God, what am I going to see? Like it really got under my skin. It was just very well done.
No, thank you. But that's in itself a comment about what do we seek in this film? What do we seek in any film, in any form of entertainment, especially the most extreme side of it? Like, like true crime about a real serial killer, or just extreme thrillers. What do we seek in them? Like, because if it's mindless entertainment, this is very weird, and that's, I guess, the film is a kind of a comment about that. But also because you said, oh, I hope I will not see it, but I know for a fact that some people come to me and are like, I wanted to see them, and that's also the point. Like, who are you? Like, on the scale of baby to Kellyanne, like how sociopathic are you when you're seeking content? You know what I mean? And so that's also the dialogue, the dance that I'm trying to have with the viewer's brain. But no, thanks for the.
What you did was perfect in regards to implying things. I couldn't have thought that it would be any better. It was perfectly implied. There's photographs of evidence where the camera is starting to drift away from the TV screen, and you see a piece of evidence, and you hear the people in the court gasp. That is so much more effective than had you just presented it on screen. And I think that for me, I'm getting the shock value at a higher level than if I was just shown it.
That's it. And I would even go further, and that's what's in my thought process from the get-go. But like a gory image, I look at the tricks, I look at the art, because, well, first you ask yourself, is this real? I hope it's not. But like, if it's not, then you look at it's really well made. Like, look, the blood, the thickness of the blood, the color of the blood, or like the prosthetics, or I literally, what I do whenever I watch a gory film, I look at the tricks. So while I'm busy looking at the tricks, I'm not scared. I'm not having a conversation with a film. I'm actually having a conversation with my own brain that takes me out of the film, because yes, maybe this is what we were talking about, the fact that we're filmmakers. We try to see maybe some things that most people might not, but even most people, I think, like, when it's very heavy in effects, whether practical or CG, dare I say, we just know, and then we look at how either good or bad the effects are. You know what I mean?
Sure.
And I didn't want that in the film. And in a weird way, I think we're oddly way less equipped to understand the artificiality of just sound alone, because it's very artificial. Like we literally built the soundscape in the film because we don't see but we hear, and it's very horrible. But we had, teenage voice actresses going in the studio. We edited that. We added sound effects. Like, it's very artificial. And I'm not going easy on you by not showing it. It's actually, on many ways, maybe harsher, maybe meaner.
Yeah. it's kind of like the difference between watching something and reading something, because your brain,
That's true.
when when you
That's true.
read about something that's scary or violent or horrific, your brain is starting to create the images,
That that's the whole film is based on this process. And I'll even go further. In my research, I went down the rabbit hole of the YouTube creepypastas. Just like, and some people are good, like some good YouTubers that are just good storyteller. And that would put me, like, let's say I was listening this in the dark with my headphones. It would get me in such a weird, very scary, very anxiety inducing. And it's just someone telling you a story. This is nuts. Like, I'm not scared. 95% of horror films, I'm not scared. I know the codes. I know where it's gonna lead. It's kind of safe space by now. I just know too much. But then I would watch a 10-minute really like creepypasta on YouTube and get freaked out of my mind. And so I tried to get back to that logic, either book reading or just century-old tradition of campfire creepy stories. I just love that.
Well, I'd love to sort of end the conversation. I think that there's something that I think a lot of aspiring filmmakers, especially in America, don't really know anything about, and that's myself included. And that is the financing of a film that is shot in a place like Quebec, because so Montreal is a beautiful city. I love it there. It smelled clean when I was there. It was like, this is like a good smelling city. I'm not used to this. Every big city in America smells filthy.
Where are you from? Where are you based?
I'm from Ohio, actually, like in Cleveland area. And so it wasn't that hard of a flight. Like, I've been to Toronto many times. I can get to Toronto in like a 5-hour drive. But I had never been to Quebec before. And I'm curious, when I look at, if I tried to imagine Red Rooms as purely as text, as a script, and I had that, and I was going to studio after studio in LA, trying to convince them that this movie where the protagonist is aloof and we don't know much about her and we're not going to see any of the violence, and I can't imagine that those meetings would get very far. And so I'm fascinated with how did you go about looking for financing to make this movie, and how does that work?
Yeah, how does that work? So you can get money to write, and then you can get money for production. I'll tell you kind of the quick story, but in 2020, I just finished Another Butterfly, my second feature. Then COVID hit. I guess I'm stuck home with a film that I don't know when it's going to be shown. So right away, I went into research, but we got money to write, but a completely different project, actually. A project that might be my next film, might very well be my next film. It's like a period film, 17th century, a bit folk horror-y, but that would be overselling the horror component. Like, it's more like a intense historical drama. I don't know, maybe you've seen La Reine Margot or films like that. Anyway, like intense period film. But so spending 2020 basically writing that off of money for a grant. So you apply with just like you have to have kind of a treatment for it. Then obviously like a cinematographic treatment and this and that, and have a few other and then it's competitive. So maybe you get it, maybe you don't. And so we got money for writing that other film. Then flash forward to early 2021. Now we would be ready to enter production, but we're facing kind of an overly ambitious project, like that period film. We kind of needed to make another film in between. So Red Rooms actually ended up being the film in between. And so in 2021, I just skipped ahead because it didn't fit with the dates of the grants application. So I was just like, I'm just gonna sprint, write it, and then try and be ready by August, which was a deadline for production grant, which is like the bigger money. And so from February 2021 till August, I basically researched and wrote, and it got to a competitive screenplay, so to already go into production potentially, and we got greenlit the first trial. So some people, it can take 3-4 times before getting access to it, and some films they never get made. Some films they end up in like the cemetery of the financial institutions of Quebec and Canada, because but we were lucky to get it greenlit first try. You put everything that can strengthen your case in these grant applications. The film is it relies a lot on mood. So obviously, like having a very good mood board. I had images ranging from, Michael Haneke film, like Cronenberg, obviously, like Nightcrawler. Nightcrawler is a very good film, very underappreciated.
Oh, it's terrific. It's one of the best movies.
Yeah, it goes toe-to-toe with the best Finchers, to me. For sure. Of course, I would put like Girl with a Dragon Tattoo, because there are so many few characters, especially women characters, like anti-hero, enigmatic, just, I wouldn't like narrow down. It's not like Girl with a Dragon Tattoo meets Black Hats. Like, I don't, that would be very dumb as a pitch. But you still need to kind of show that the history of cinema, you're not completely going into unknown territory, which is funny because originality is such a great value, and yet for people reading it or maybe the meetings that you're talking about, meeting execs from production companies, I guess the trick, if there is one, I don't lie in my grants applications, but I kind of embellish the fact that, trust me, it's been done before and it's been convincingly done before. But that's like a Trojan horse completely, because what I'm trying to do is actually go like pushing the boundaries a little bit. Not saying this in an overly confident way or like in an arrogant way, but still, like, what's the point of remaking something that has already been made in the past? Like, I'm going to just, if I want to make the Girl with the Dragon Tattoo in Quebec, that would feel cheap. Like, I would just rewatch Girl with the Dragon Tattoo if that's your only purpose in life. So yeah, just having a mosaic of other films that have been made that have this tone. But also, like, what I'm getting at is that I was so literal and so blatantly explicit about the character's motivations. In writing, Kellyanne makes so much sense you wouldn't believe. Like, and it's like she does this because of that, and it's like, I'm taking your hand, I'm walking you through her narrative arc. But again, this is such a Trojan horse, because I knew full well that, like, the value of the film is the potential diverging opinions about it. I love Haneke again, so I mean, watching Caché and discussing the film.
I love that movie.
I love Mulholland Drive, and that's also part of the fun, and that's why it has a lasting impact. So this is kind of my ace in the hole. This is my kind of, I said that I didn't lie at all, but I was being overly explicit for like an analyst, because an analyst will take anything that is blurry in your pitch against you. And I mean, and I know, and we know full well that having something that is a bit enigmatic and blurry sometimes can be such a strength. But yeah, I couldn't sell that super hard, so I went super literal, and it got greenlit.
It's interesting how much of that actually is kind of similar, especially the idea of trying to convince people with money that there is a proven roadmap already for your movie. Like, look at the success that this has had. I can be in that lane, but in the back of your head, you're thinking, I'm
do something fresh. I'm trying to do something different. But you shouldn't. That shouldn't be the first thing you say.
No,
I guess. But then, that's what's funny about originality. Everybody will actually value originality. But when you have like right now, like where Megalopolis is out, like and people are like, no, this doesn't work, and but maybe it's just like, just trying to be really original, and that doesn't, not to excuse anything about that film in particular, but you know what I mean? It's like a lot of people think they want originality, and when they're in the face of originality, they push it back, and
I completely agree with you. I have thought about this a lot, man. I really have. I've paid attention quite a bit to the way people write about movies, and this is a whole other podcast. But like,
of course,
there is 100% a push for originality, but also a push back against it when you're confronted with it. When you are confronted with something that you have not seen before, it's almost like some people, maybe even subconsciously, are trying to push it back into a thing that they understand, because they have to write about it and they have to talk about it.
I'll one up what you're saying, because it's so true. But like, when your film is not finished, it's even worse. Like test screenings, having readers, like anything, because again, like very literate and intelligent. Like I'm not gonna have it read, or people I bring in the screenings. Like I know full well that I'm not gonna make a film for everybody. So I just, I don't even want to fight that battle anymore. Like I just, I'll try and get a passionate niche, and that's as much as I can get out of the kinds of films that I'm trying to make. I'm trying to make generous film. Like they're accessible in their own way, and yet not for everyone, obviously. But I just think if you want to please everyone, you're really pleasing nobody, and that's kind of you're kind of dead even before you can live. But let me tell you that, like in test screenings, every single thing that is a bit audacious and daring has been questioned. Like obviously the long takes, and it's so funny because what is being questioned when your film is in this state of fragility is the exact thing that is being praised when the film arrives, when in the finished form. When you're like, because a finished film is arrogant, this is my vision, deal with it, and I'm forcing you. But whenever you have other voices that are trying to shape that, when it's not completely on its feet yet, it's actually a good thing that I don't listen to everyone. It's not a democracy making a film. Like I've vetoed so many of these comments. It's good to hear these comments. It's good to know where that comes from. But you really need to push for your audacious bits. And it did that for my first feature even. Like there is a long take, a very, very long dialogue scene at the beginning of the film. Systematically, people were like, you need to trim it down. You need to have a shot counter shot at one point. Like you cannot just sustain an 8-minute 2-shot of people talking. And then I started to ask myself, like, oh, maybe they're right. Maybe I have to do. And then I was like, no, I'm going to stick to my gut feeling, and whatever. And when the film was finished, people were like, oh, wow, this is so fresh. Like this is such an interesting way to have these people find each other, and it's minimalistic and engrossing, and everything that it's been criticized before when it wasn't up on its feet yet, it's the stuff that made it unique and interesting at the end. This is very strange, but like, yeah.
I completely agree. It's an interesting phenomenon, but it's true. The first time I ever heard about Steve McQueen's movie Hunger with Michael Fassbender was people saying, exactly, people saying there's a 17-minute conversation, one take. And, I imagine that McQueen probably got pushback from that when he was, cutting the movie together. And
100%. Yeah. Or the pie scene in A Ghost Story.
Exactly. Yeah, she just eats a pie for a whole hour.
That's amazing. It's amazing. I love that. I love that shit.
I think everything you've said about Red Rooms it just makes me want to watch it again. I was already going to watch it again, but I'm going to again because there are very few movies that come out for me that I actually feel kind of like studying and learning from and taking something from. Movies like Under the Skin or Enemy, Denis Villeneuve's Enemy. Movies that are extremely challenging in one specific way, but that invite you to create your own interpretations of things, to fill in the story with your own imagination. And it's all there. And it's just such a wonderful film. Great lead performance, incredible. I haven't even mentioned the sound design. There's amazing sound design and score.
Thank you.
I just think that it's a movie everybody should watch. Like I said, it is available VOD October 4th. Please see it. I'm privileged to have talked to you, man, for the past hour. It's really nice.
Thank you. Thank you, Chris. It's been a pleasure.